Bill Moyers is away this week, and I am pleased to be sitting in for him. Our subject is Syria. What began there 2.5 years ago as part of the Arab Spring has turned into an all-out civil war. Now has come the shocking evidence of poison gas attacks, a fatal escalation that has led President Obama to ask Congress to authorize the limited use of military force. And if we take action, where and when does it stop? Historian and analyst Andrew Bacevich is here asking those questions. A graduate of West Point and a Vietnam veteran, he served the military for 23 years before becoming a professor at Boston University. His books include The Limits of Power and Washington Rules. His latest, Breach of Trust. Andrew Bacevich, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'm pleased to have this chance to chat with you for a lot of reasons. One, I don't know who else has more cred than you. What would a 23-year graduate of West Point offer us now regarding the dilemma in which Obama finds himself regarding Syria?
Well, I mean, if I could have 5 minutes of the president's time, I'd say, Mr. President, the issue really is not Syria. I mean, you're being told that it's Syria. You're being told you have to do something about Syria, that you have to make a decision about Syria, that somehow your credibility is on the line. But I'd say, Mr. President, that's not true. The issue really here is whether or not an effort over the course of several decades, dating back to the promulgation of the Carter Doctrine in 1980, an effort that extends over several decades to employ American power, military power, overt, covert, military power exercised through proxies, an effort to use military power to somehow stabilize or fix or liberate or transform the greater Middle East hasn't worked. I mean, if you think back to 1980 and just sort of tick off the number of military enterprises that we have been engaged in that part of the world, large and small, Beirut, Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Somalia, and on, and ask yourself, what have we got done? What have we achieved? Is the region becoming more stable? Is it becoming more democratic? Are we enhancing America's standing in the eyes of the people of the Islamic world? The answers are no, no, and no. So why, Mr. President, do you think that initiating yet another war, because if we bomb Syria, it's a war, why do you think that initiating yet another war in this protracted enterprise is going to produce a different outcome? Wouldn't it be perhaps wise to ask ourselves if this militarized approach to the region maybe is a fool's errand? Maybe it's fundamentally misguided. Maybe the questions are not tactical and operational, but strategic and political. I have to say I'm just struck by the fact that Secretary of State Kerry has become the leading proponent for war. That's our Secretary of State's job.
And he threw his medals back.
Well, that's why it's doubly ironic that the Secretary of State is the war promoter and that our Secretary of State happens to be a guy who came into politics basically advertising himself as the guy who, because of his Vietnam experiences, understands war, understands the lessons of Vietnam, and is therefore going to prevent us from doing dumb things. On the contrary, he's the lead cheerleader to go do another dumb thing.
President Obama would say to you, these are children being grossly and painfully killed.
They are.
How can you watch these videos with the foam coming out of the nostrils? And we've got to do something.
Well, the attack is a heinous act. Now, does the fact that they were killed with chemicals make it more heinous than if they were killed with conventional munitions? I'm not persuaded. I mean, I think the issue, one of the issues here, to the extent that moral considerations drive U.S. policy, and I would say, as a practical matter, they don't, but let's pretend that they do. To the extent that moral considerations drive U.S. policy, there's a couple of questions to ask. One would be, why here and not someplace else? And the other question would be, well, if our concerns are humanitarian, why is waging war the best means to advance a humanitarian agenda? If indeed U.S. policy is informed by concern for the people of Syria, let's just pretend that's the case, even though I don't think it is. If it's informed by concern for the people of Syria, why is peppering Damascus with cruise missiles the best way to demonstrate that concern? I mean, a little bit of creative statesmanship, it seems to me, might say that there are other things we could do that would actually benefit the people of Syria, who are suffering greatly, who are fleeing their country into hundreds of thousands, who are living in wretched refugee camps. Why don't we do something about that? Why wouldn't that be a better thing to do from a moral perspective than bombing Damascus?
How do we explain media's submission to these warlike... let me just give you one. Nicholas Kristof of the Times. Since President Obama established a red line about chemical weapons use, his credibility has been at stake. He can't just whimper and back down. Whimper. I mean, who wants a whimperer for president? And there's an awful lot of macho in this. And by the way, why can't the president just say, hey, I really shouldn't have said red line. That was a mistake. It was a moment. I'm a human. Sue me. I'm rectifying that now, and I'm going to take a more...
Well, I think one point there is that in many respects, this crisis is being driven by domestic politics. I think the president did make a mistake in drawing that red line. I suspect the president actually understands he made a mistake. And then when Assad called his bluff, as it were, the president finds himself in a position where, yes, he's got to do something to restore his credibility. Well, when you think about it, it's not going to restore any credibility. I mean, when you think about it, is credibility worth going to war for? When you think about it, if indeed American credibility in that part of the world is kind of low right now, is it because the president drew a red line and didn't act? Or could it be because of the folly of American wars in places like Iraq? I mean, will bombing Syria make the memory of Iraq go away? Well, the memory of Iraq has already gone away for most Americans, but is it going to cause people in the Arab world or the broader Islamic world to forget Iraq and all the chaos that we created?
One of the conservative talking heads in the shout shows on cable said that if Obama goes to Congress, he will show weakness. I mean, it's only in the Constitution. He will show weakness if he obeys the Constitution. Everything is turned upside down here now.
Well, I think if there's one iota of good news here, I think it is that he has gone to the Congress. Now, the president didn't go to the Congress because he realized that he's a constitutional lawyer and suddenly was becoming a strict constructionist. He went to the Congress because he was sitting out there on this limb all by himself, even without the Brits, and decided that it was a lonely place to be, and he wanted to see if he could induce the Congress to come out and join him. But that said, whether he intends it or not, he is setting a precedent that says that maybe when we do attack some country, the Congress ought to be consulted. And the significance of that, I think, is 3, 4, 5 years from now, when Obama's successor has some great idea that he wants to go bomb somebody or invade somebody, I hope there will be some questions asked that will say, hey, wait a second, Mr. President. Back in 2013, before Obama acted, he thought he needed to ask the Congress. Why doesn't that apply to you? So I think that's the one little bit of good news out of this circumstance.
Except Obama made the point emphatically that I don't need your approval. I can go alone anyway.
Yeah, he did.
We are the only country with the capacity to do what we're about to do in Syria. Do you believe that?
There's no question that in terms of the capability to project power, to put ordnance on targets, to mass military power in every dimension, land, sea, air, cyberspace, our capabilities are beyond anybody's ability to match. Unfortunately, that doesn't necessarily yield wise policies. It doesn't even yield military victory. Again, when you think back on the actual history, the military history of the United States in the Middle East over the past several decades, victory has been exceedingly hard to come by. We're always stronger by many measures than the adversary. But somehow or other, being strong doesn't translate into political objectives being achieved quickly or economically. What actually happens is that the projection of American power leads to unexpected complications and gets us more deeply embedded in a set of circumstances that we can't handle. There are enormously deep and powerful forces of change that have come to the surface and are transforming that part of the world. We have claimed, presidents have claimed, George Herbert Walker Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and now this president have claimed that we possess the capacity to somehow direct or control these processes of change. Even though the truth is, we don't have that capacity. The truth is, we are largely irrelevant to what's going on in that part of the world. But if we reach out and, use our military power to drop some missiles here and there, we can sustain the illusion that we have some kind of relevance. But we don't.